Hey guys, I'm Marco Clark, here to teach you the general basics of skateboarding. To start off, there are several things that I will go through in this video. So I've taken the courtesy to separate the different sections that you came to find. So if you just so happen to want to know all the things that I want to go through in this video, I welcome you to watch the whole video. So, there are 5 major sections that I plan to go through the entire video. First being the introduction to skateboarding, then basics of skateboarding, safety, basics of skating, and then finally intermediate of skateboarding. So welcome to Marco Clark's general basics of skateboarding.
So where did skateboarding come from? Well, that question dates back to 1950s when the surfing craze was at its full blast. People wanted to surf more and continue it on land. Surfers just started to build their own board with wheels underneath it. Skateboarding was nothing like now. It was much like surfing. However, it wasn't until the 1960s where skateboarding really got big. It was when the company started to mass-produce skateboards. But this fad died off because of the safety regulators deeming it unsafe through the course of its short history. Skateboarding experiences several ups and downs through the years. For each transition, it was approximately 10 years apart. Skating revived in the 70s when the kicktail and urethane wheel was invented, resulting to the ollie. Initiating the start of modern skating. But this fad once again died off because of the increasing insurance and the lack of people playing the sport. This forced skaters to go to streets because all parks were closing down and molded the new style of skateboarding as we know it now. Street skating. This changed the culture of skateboarding to the punk baggy style we now know, and once again revolutionizing skateboarding, changing the sport to a more dangerous approach. And it wasn't until the 90s before the skateboarding was once again popularized. Because of the X Games in Rhode Island, when ESPN exposed skateboarding, people started to take a new interest in skateboarding and once again bringing the sport back from the underground to mainstream. And from here on, more and more companies decided to advertise through skateboarding and ultimately form the community we have now. And since there are so many companies funding this sport, it created full-time jobs for professional skaters as opposed to the traditional skaters who had to work and skate at the same time, leveling skaters to a recognized and well-respected sport as it is today.
Alright, so before I bore you guys with what this board is composed of, I want to take a moment to point out how important it is to know your own board. Because it's true from different perspectives. Because you have to really know what you want and how things can be fixed if something goes wrong. Anyways, back to the topic. So, it could be helpful if you had boards with you, but I'm sure you'll be able to follow along. So, here are one of the most asked questions that I have had. Yes. What's the difference between a longboard and a skateboard? Well, there's only 2 major differences, and it's easily distinguishable. Longboards are in most cases slightly longer than skateboards, thus the name longboard. But what the real difference is between the boards are the wheels and the concave, which I'll show you later. Here are the 2 different types of wheels that you'll see. As you already may notice, the longboard wheels are significantly larger than the skateboard wheels. And not only that, they're also a lot softer than skateboard wheels. Why? What's the difference in the performance? Well, great question.
Whereas longboards are generally used to cruise and go on high speeds with, skateboards are just meant to do tricks and are generally not used for cruising.
Alright, so now you know the main differences between longboards and skateboards. So, to go more in depth, I'll teach you the 8 main components of each skateboard and longboard. Alright, so, first and most obvious, the deck. It is the board that usually has creative graphics on the deck. Alright, so, the second most obvious. The wheel, as I mentioned, comes in many different types and sizes. But usually the main difference between them are the hardness, since this directly affects the skater's performance under different circumstances, such as hard wheels are for trick, they're lighter and more mobile, and softer wheels are heavier but quicker, which is why they're not optimal for tricks that require to pop, which I'll later discuss on the video. The third essential part to a skateboard is less obvious compared to the previous two. It's the riser pads. Riser pads. This is the piece of rubber that separates the board from trucks.
This part of the board allows the skater to make steeper turns and harder falls without the ground actually touching the board. Furthermore, this part also allows the board to absorb a considerable amount of shock.
Alright, the fourth part to a skateboard would be the trucks. They are the metal parts that connect the wheel and the deck, and it allows you to turn as well as the rising pads. Alright, so the fifth part of the skateboard are the mounting bolts. There are 4 on each side, and they mount the trucks onto the board. Alright, so the sixth part of the skateboard would be the grip tape. This is actually stuck to the deck, and this function is quite obvious. It gives the rider better grip and the assurance of not slipping off the board, making it one of the valuable parts to the skater. The seventh part to a skateboard would be the wheel bearings. These are what makes the wheel spin, and are one of the major factors to a quick and efficient skateboard. However, you shouldn't be worried about for starting skaters. These bearings shouldn't be changed from time to time, depending on the conditions of the board. Alright, so the last part of the skateboard is the mounting bolts. Here. These are the hexagonal donuts that stick the mounting bolts onto the truck, which stabilizes the board. Make sure you keep these very tight, because you do not want these to come loose when you're skateboarding, because then your trucks would just fall off your board. Alright, so we learned all the parts towards skateboard. So let's learn how to switch a wheel.
Loving every single second of it, even when it's rough. It's a blessing to have people listen, especially when you come from generation deficit attention. So we live life like we could die.
Okay, first off, take the skate tool and screw the bolt on the wheel off. It's very simple. Just like this. Okay, after screwing it out, place it out. And take the wheel, take it out first. So in the wheel, there's a bearing on each side. So you take the bearing and stick it in the kingpin, like this. Softly gouge it out, and just gouge the bearing out. Alright, so do it for each side. So only put a little in. Just insert about this much in, and then you can just gouge it out. Same goes with both sides. Alright, softly and you'll have it already come out. Okay, so that's how you take the wheels out. The second part is putting it back in. Alright, so place a bearing in the kingpin, and place the wheel like this. And use both hands and push the wheel hard like this. Okay. So here, push it and spin the wheel. If it balances and spins, you've done it correctly. Everybody see? So do the same to both sides. So push again. Check again. If it's balanced, it means it's okay. Lastly, we have to screw the bolt back on. And screw it on with a skate tool. And there you have it.
Waste another night, stage dive, jump like you can fly. Give me something that can touch when the sun rises.
Alright, so we've gone through the basics of skateboarding. So one more thing before we jump into action. Safety. Alright, I know this sounds boring and tedious, but without this component, you may just very well end up as my friend right here. Friend's leg right here, or probably even worse. So, there's a couple safety precautions that you need to take before you start skating. And first off, you might want to get some safety gear like we have over here. Alright, so just make sure you protect your head, because more than 25,000 people get rushed to emergency rooms because of skate-related injuries. So, here are some safety guidelines that you should follow before skating. Alright, having a suitable board, alright? So, so as I said, there are different boards for different types of skating. So don't go mountain boarding when you have a skateboard, and don't do that vice versa. Then, always protect your head. So, to protect your head, you'll need some safety-regulated helmet. So don't just take the old bucket from your garage or something. Just make sure you wear a safety-regulated helmet. Alright, so, third pointer. Alright, so shoes. Don't go out wearing flip-flops. It's just frustrating to see people skating wearing flip-flops, because it's inefficient, it's dangerous, and it's just stupid in general. So, wear shoes that has extra padding. So, something like this. Usually, no shoes with double padding on top, much like this. Much like the double layers on top. Should be fine, but do judge with common sense, because some hiking shoes might be off. Alright, ultimately, terrains. So, terrains, you can really pretty much skate anywhere. Just make sure that it matches the following 3 criteria. So, make sure when you're skating, the floor is dry and it's not wet and slippery, because first off, it damages your board. Second off, it's just dangerous in general. So, the second criteria would be just have no notable marks or hazards in the road, such as large cracks in the road, large rocks, and such like. So, because if you hit them in high speeds, you'll end up flying and hitting yourself pretty badly. So, finally, and most importantly, you are separated from the cars, from either your railings, your streets. Just make sure that you have a railing that separates you from the car. And just don't go skating down the road. It's not worth it. Because that's the most dangerous thing about skateboarding, cars hitting you. Okay, so here are some suggestions as to where you should be skating.
Skate parks.
Obviously, because they have really good terrain, and they have ramps specifically designed for you, and they also have really smooth roads, and they're just really good for skateboarding, plus skate parks.
Empty swimming pools.
Just make sure the pool surface is good, because sometimes pools are quite rude. Alright, so another place that I like to skate in is bike trails and walking trails. Not only are they smooth, they're also very long distance, so you can just skate for quite a while if you went to a bike trail. So, just make sure, but keep in mind that if you hit someone with your board, they'll get mad, and trust me, personal experience. So just wait until that you train until you're bored, and you can just stop and turn fairly easily. Then you can start hitting those spots, because you really don't want to hit someone. Alright, so just make sure that you practice some more skateboarding before you go street skating. Okay, so speaking of street skating, I mean streets that are not completely infested with cars. So here's an optimal street skating spot.
Alright, so you can tell this track is good because there's not many notable cracks in the road. And since it's a pattern, I would be able to quickly identify the crack and reassure myself that I won't hit myself in the face. Alright, so one more thing that's good about this trail is there is a rail that separates me and the car. And that's one of the most important things for trails that you pick. Because if once you have an accident, you might fall out in the street and you'll get hit by a car, and that's one of the most dangerous things. So, one last safety tip. And also one of the most important ones. It's always cross the road with your board in your hand, not while you're skating. Because you never want to have your board going when you're walking on the street. You look both sides. And that's really all there is to it, is to avoid significant hazards for your skateboarding and not hurt yourself. And that's really all there is to it for safety of skateboarding. And now onto the more exciting stuff, the basics of skateboarding.
Many of y'all want to be thugs anyhow, face the consequence of your childish nonsense. I can make your head explode just by my lyrical content. Get you in my scope and let it...
Now, to the basics of skateboarding. The fundamental of skateboarding is the stance, and there are only two practical ways as to standing on a skateboard. The goofy and the regular. The regular being the right foot as your back foot, and the goofy being the opposite. Alright, to find out which one you are, there are two easy tests that you could do. Okay, so for the first test, you'll need to find a flight of stairs. So once you find a flight of stairs, you'll take your first step. And the first step that you took with whichever foot would be your back foot. So in this case, my right foot. So the second test. Alright, the second test. Okay, so all you have to do is find a ball of some sort and set an achievable goal for you to kick to. And then whichever foot that you kick with should be the foot of your back foot. Alright, so despite these tests, you don't actually have to follow whichever one you are. It's just that whichever muscle is more developed will make your learning process easier without having to develop your muscles. Anyways. Okay, so now you know which stance you are. So, me personally, I'm a regular, but it really wouldn't affect what you learn from me since it's just all the same, but it's different sides. So, now you're either anxiously waiting on your board for me to teach you which stance is correct, or you're ready on the board. So, simple. The correct stance is actually, it is when your front foot is facing the front of the board, while it doesn't exceed the top pair of the vaults, and it has the contact with lower pairs of vaults in the front. Alongside with your back foot facing the side, contacting the upper pair of the vaults. That's the good stance when you get on the board. Once you're going at a good steady speed, your stance should change slightly, with your front foot to the side parallel to the back foot, making it easier to turn and a lot more steady. Take a note though, is that when you have your front foot to the side, it is harder to push off with your back foot and maintain the balance at the same time. Okay, so one last thing before we learn to push off from the board. We need to learn the 4 practical ways of stopping: the foot drag, the heel drag, the power slide, and the bail. To perform the foot drag, you drag your back foot on the ground to slow the momentum by friction. It takes some practice to be able to do it smoothly, but it should be very easy to do after learning it. To the heel drag. This is slightly more advanced compared to the foot drag. To perform this, the skater has to take the heel off the back of the foot off the board, but not completely off. The skater then leans back on the back foot with the heel still on the ground and the other side of the board in the air. Alright, the power slide. This is quite an advanced stop, so I don't recommend you to try this stop until you have practiced more intermediate tricks such as the ollie and tic-tacking. So, but this trick is essentially what you do is... So for this trick, you would want to put your front foot on the top of the board and the back foot at the tail of the board. So, you want your foot positioning to be like this when you're trying a power slide. So essentially what you want to do is slide your back wheels or front wheels 90 degrees, making the board horizontal beneath you. Something like that. So skidding to stop the board.
The bail. This is really exactly what it sounds like. If all else goes wrong, just bail. Simply jump in front of you if possible to stop the skateboard. If not possible, then any other side. Just make sure that you've checked yourself before for any major wound before you leave.
Just keep in mind, a skateboard is a lot cheaper and a lot less painful than a broken leg or arm. Enough with the stances and the stopping of the skateboard. Let's learn how to actually push off a skateboard and how to move on one. Remember the boarding stance to start off with? Apply that stance to use your back foot and push off with a long, hard kick. Repeat a couple times until you reach a comfortable speed. Then revert to this moving stance that I mentioned. After that, when you start to slow down, simply repeat the process. Back up. And now that's all there is to it on how to push off a skateboard. Okay, now that's all there is to it for moving in a straight line for a skateboard. Now onto turning. First off, turning in skateboarding is called carving. And carving is basically shifting weight on whichever side that you want to go. Now, say I wanted to make a steeper turn. You would have to apply different levels of pressure. Because say I wanted to make a really steep turn, I would have to apply a lot more pressure in my toe side if I wanted to turn right. It's very simple really. Just get on your board and try it out. Don't get discouraged when you fall. Very including myself.
Watch me explode.
Okay, so I see you practice your skateboarding for a little bit, or you just decided to watch a section because you feel like it. Both ways, welcome to the intermediate of skateboarding. In this section, I'll be teaching you how to tic-tac and ollie. Okay, for tic-tacking. For this trick, you have to be really comfortable and balanced with your board. Alright, so for this trick, what the skater does is he applies pressure to the back foot and then swings his weight to whichever side he wants to turn to. This maneuver is used to cut tight corners and times when you can't turn, you have to use this maneuver. So, this sounds a lot more complicated than it is, so why don't I just show you? Alright, it doesn't look that hard, right? Well, yeah, it's actually quite easy. So, let me explain to you how this works. You'll need to place your back foot on the tail horizontally, and your front foot slightly behind the front truck, or slightly contacting it. It's really personal preference. Then you would want to balance yourself on your back foot by shifting a little more weight on your back, thus popping your board onto the air slightly. But you don't want to get too high, just slightly below the height of your knees, and move your shoulders to the direction you would like to turn to. Okay, so if you followed my instructions correctly, you should have moved your board and landed it. If not, then you just have to practice more, because this trick really requires you to know how to balance and be comfortable on your board, since every person's weight and strength to pop varies. So, now you learned the tic-tac. Now I'm going to teach you the first and most important aerial trick that each skater learns, the ollie. Alright, so, for the ollie, it's one of the most basic tricks, but the difficulty varies for each person. For me personally, it took me about 2 months before I could start landing my ollie, and I've known people that could land it the first day that they learned it. So, let's just cut straight through it. Okay, I'm going to teach you the foot placements of the ollie, and it's one of the most important things when you try to ollie. And I didn't really realize that until the last periods that I started to not know how to ollie. So, as for the foot placement of the ollie, you would like to put your right foot or your back foot on the center of the tail of the board, and make sure it's the center, not the sides, because I didn't really realize that until for a while, because I couldn't get my pops right. And for your front foot, it really varies. Some people put it at the back of the bolts, some people put it almost right in the front, because you have to slide your board up before you can ollie. So if you put it at the back of the board, you'd go higher, but it'd be a lot harder for you to ollie. So I recommend you to start right in front of the front bolts. So, alright, so to sum it up, the ollie requires you to bend, hop, jump and slide, bend, then land again. And that's really all there is to the fundamentals of ollieing. So to nail this trick right now, you just have to go out and practice and find your balance when you jump. And that's really all there is to ollie. And once you master this trick, you'll be able to go anywhere from there on. Because the ollie is the basis for many other tricks.
Power, 41 souls murdered in 50 hours. Papery murder.
Hey guys, I'm Marco, and I'm back in the slopes of Serbia with a snowboard. So, remember the carving and balancing on the skateboard? Well, you can also use that on the snowboard, because the two sports are actually strikingly similar, for obvious reasons. So if you'd like to pick up a snowboard after skateboarding, you find it a lot easier, and the skills from skateboarding will also transfer to snowboarding. So, I've also left one more section for the people who want to know a little more about the physics of skateboarding. So if you'd like to know more about that, stay tuned.
On the day Fred Hampton died, real niggas multiply. Yeah, they said but 21 are supposed to die. So I'm out here celebrating my post-demise. If you put crabs in the barrel to ensure your survival, you gon' end up pulling down niggas that look just like...
Okay, I've added in a little section of physics for you people who want to know how the ollie really works. Because I was quite curious on how the board will jump up by just simply popping and sliding. So I found out that this was actually quite relative to Newton's second law of physics, where F equals half of m times v squared, which just simply, force is equivalent to half of mass times velocity squared. So seeing as the back wheels act as a lever, the force exerted to the tail of the board will cause the board to pop. And that's why the size of the person doesn't really matter in skateboarding, because as long as he or she snaps the board with enough speed, the board will definitely pop up.
The board will snap up because of the geometric progression of the velocity, as the squared speed of your kick will make up for the weight that you lack. So after the board pops, the skater uses the friction to balance out the board in the air, because when you slide up towards the top of the board, you balance out the excess force at the front with the friction between your shoe and the grip tape. After that, gravity finally takes action and draws you back onto the ground, finally resulting into an ollie. Anyways, thanks for sticking around again. Happy skating.